I don't know how many people of colour are listening to this programme, but the chances are I have been invited onto radio and television programmes to talk about whether or not you are victims of police racism more often than you have. Do you want to just stop and have a little think about that? Male, pale and stale. Admittedly, something of a liberal, someone who tries to live by largely Christian values, despite that being desperately unfashionable and by far from the only grounding for trying to lead a moral life, or at least a decent life, trying to put others sometimes ahead of yourself, trying to imagine what the world would be like if you walked in another man's shoes. So it is, I think it's absurd that I've ever been asked in a public space. Maybe it's all right for me to present the programmes, which is kind of where things have ended up for me. But at the beginning of my career, I would often be on those programmes where the debate changes every 20 minutes and lo and behold, stop and search racist. Well, I am a middle-aged white man. I've got very, very powerful views on whether or not stop. Shut up, O'Brien, will you? What the hell? Who the hell do you think you are? And yet it never crosses our mind when we're in that moment. And then, of course, you've got people who have the opposite view to me, who have just as little experience, knowledge or understanding of what it's actually like on the streets, as it were, and they're even more likely to be invited onto the programme as elderly white men to explain why young black men should be treated in a way that they have no knowledge, experience or understanding of whatsoever. And at the end of the programme, do you know what happens? They give us a cheque. Or they invite us to invoice for £250 for sharing our views as old white men on what it's like on the streets where police stop and search young people. And don't forget, it's a very important point, this. It's not as important as I used to think it is, but the current proposals from the government remove discrimination. They're trying to make it easier for the police to stop and search people indiscriminately, with no grounds for suspicion. I used to buy into the argument that grounds for suspicion played a part in this debate. For the record, I don't anymore, and I'll explain why. Well, I'll tell you why now, in case you think that I'm setting myself up for an almighty own goal by sitting here as a white man asking whether or not white men should be talking about this issue. I draw all of my opinions on this subject from listening to people of colour. All of them, every single one. And I can't believe it took me the best part of 15 years, probably, in this job. Maybe I've been a bit unkind. Best part of a decade to realise how ridiculous it was to approach it in any other way. And I mention the money because I think that's probably part of the problem. If someone's paying me for my opinions, it doesn't really cross my mind that it might be absolutely ridiculous to ask me what they are. You might as well ask me my opinion on, I don't know, the Sino-Japanese war. Or the Great Corn Law debate. Well, actually, I know a little bit about that. The tulip fever that kicked off in Holland was it the 17th century? I don't even know what century it was. But if you're giving me 250 quid to talk about my opinions on it, then they must matter, right? Someone's paying me. The BBC have invited me onto a prestigious debate programme on Sunday morning to talk about something I know nothing about. But if the BBC are going to give me money to talk about it, then I can't be completely unqualified, can I? It can't be ridiculous. It can't be completely ridiculous. 10 minutes after 10 is the time. So that's the question, really. Two questions here. We can, I think, have the debate, but I do worry whether it is a little bit patronising. Is that the right word? A little bit, I don't know, silly to have the debate about whether or not, just on the simple question of whether or not the police are racist, whether or not the imposition of stop and search is racist. How the hell do we know as white people? We just don't. So I don't know that there's much room for discussion there. I appreciate that you might not see it quite as clearly as I do now, but then if you don't, then it's possible that in recent months you found yourself on the other side of a debate or a culture war or an energetic but polite conversation. You found yourself recently on the other side to the England football team, the National Trust and the RNLI. If in the last few weeks you found yourself on the other side of the fence from the National Trust, the England football team, the most successful England football team since 1966, and the RNLI, then it's probably time to give your head a wobble, isn't it? At least at some point. What's that? Who's the enemy today? Well, we've moved on, actually. We no longer get aerated about audiences that don't exist not singing songs at the last night of the proms, or dance troupes on Britain's Got Talent dancing in a way that we consider to be provocative. No, we're really picking on the important issues now. The National Trust, the RNLI, and the most successful England football team since 1966. How dare you suggest that race has anything to do with any of these positions whatsoever? So I don't know that is actually a conversation to be had, but I do know that some people listening won't yet be ready to acknowledge or accept that, and I don't want you to feel alienated or excluded from the listening process.